is JS Party, your weekly celebration of JavaScript and the web. If you like this show, you will love the changelog. It's news on Mondays, deep technical interviews on Wednesdays, and on Fridays, an awesome talk show. That's a lot like JS Party, now that I'm thinking about it. Find us by searching for the changelog wherever you listen to podcasts. Big thanks to our partners at Fly.io. Launch your app in 5 minutes or less all around the world. Learn how at Fly.io. Okay, hey, it is party time, y'all.
What's up, friends and party people? Adam here. I'm sitting with Danny Grant, co-founder and CEO of Jam.dev, one of our new sponsors. Yes, Jam.dev is one-click bug reports that devs love. It's just too easy. Get Jam for free today at Jam.dev. So, Danny, how do you explain what Jam is and how it helps teams be more effective?
Jam is the fastest way to capture a bug in a way that developers can debug it faster. It's a browser plugin that hooks into DevTools, so when anyone on your team spots a bug, they can one-click capture what happened on the screen, plus everything in DevTools, console logs, network requests, session information, and it grabs it into a link so that when you open up the ticket, you have every single thing you need to debug. You don't have to ask a single follow-up question. This is for teams who want to spend their time building new features, not fixing old ones. I think that the most impact a software engineer can have is on building the future for their customers. It's on making things easier. It's building what's next. And so we want to make sure that you're not spending your whole afternoon just trying to repro a bug. Instead, you have everything you need to just get started.
Okay, friends, go to jam.dev and learn more about what Jam is doing for teams to make bug reporting and all that fun stuff super easy, super fast. Get Jam for free today, jam.dev. Again, jam.dev.
Yes, you know the sound of those Breakmaster cylinder beats means it's time once again for JS Party. I'm Jerod, your internet friend, and I'm joined by my friends Nick Nisi.
Now I had the time of my life. Oi, oi.
Please keep going. Please never stop.
Never felt like this before.
And KBall.
And so we've come to the end of the road.
Hello. And Amy.
I'm going to spare everybody. Hello.
Thought you guys might hit me up with the triple song. All right, fair enough. And we are here for one last JS Party. You probably heard by now, since we delayed our finale quite a bit, that yes, JS Party is coming to an end, along with all other changelog pods that aren't named the changelog. But we've had a blast. We hope you've had a blast. And we are here today to have one last party. Traditionally, we do a New Year's party. In fact, for the last 3 or 4, maybe 5 years, we've had our first episode of every year has been called New Year's Party, in which we had made some predictions, we had made some resolutions, and then we hold our feet to the fire the following year and see who was right, who was wrong, and who failed miserably. Usually all of us are wrong and failing, but we thought we'd do that even though it's, almost February, might be February by the time we hit publish on this sucker. And so everyone's kind of over it with predictions and stuff, but you know what? It's our last show. We're going to do what we want to do around these parts. And one thing I really wanted to do, although Chris Bone Skull Hiller is supposed to be here, he might hop in mid-show. We'll see what happens with the schedule. But he had this epic prediction, which was seemingly a surefire winner, was that he predicted Jimmy Carter would die in 2024 because he'd been on hospice for a very long time. And I was going to say Dog Nabbit. Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. I'm not happy the guy died. But he almost made it. He almost made it all the way to the end. It was like a day or two. What day did Jimmy Carter die? Was it like December 28th or something like this? He made it all the way to the end of the year, outlasting most people who live, making it, 100 years. And Chris was almost wrong. Chris was almost wrong, but at the last hour, President Jimmy Carter passed away.
December 29th.
December 29th, so 2 days shy.
Chris thought he was going to lose, and he slipped something into the water.
Yeah, he must have insider access there, making sure that it happened. But that was, I thought, funny because when he made the prediction, we're like, yeah, well, that's not a hard one because he's expected to die any day now. But man, he continued to outlast all the predictions until the very end of the year. So
I think he might be the only one that was right.
do you remember yours?
I was just going back. I don't remember what it was this year.
I have it here.
Okay.
You predicted that towards the second half of next year, now this was back a year ago now, so you were talking about 24, that we're going to get back to something that feels a little bit more stable in the tech industry, specifically with regard to layoffs, overall vibes, etc. How did you rate yourself on that one?
I would rate myself a loss on that.
Yeah.
I think it's taken a lot longer than I expected to get back to normal. I don't think it is back to normal. I think there are a lot of things that sort of moved in a more positive direction. I don't think it's felt as negative as it did before, but less negative is not the same thing as a prediction of back to normal and positive vibes. So
Right.
I'm going to give myself the big L there.
Fair enough. Nick, you had a prediction as well. Do you remember what it was?
I sure don't.
I could make up whatever I want right now. You predicted that TypeScript would lose market share to an up-and-coming new technology called JavaScript.
That's false.
No, you actually predicted that Next.js, the facade, a Next facade to the Vercel advertisement that it is, would finally shine through, and it's going to really affect React's market share. So people will start to realize that Next is merely a Vercel advertisement. Now I'm paraphrasing you and characterizing what you said. Something like that. And that it would be so much so a drop-off of usage because people would be upset about that, I guess, that they're going to stop using React.
And I was right.
Okay.
Didn't we put a hard prediction on Astro taking over relative to Next?
Yeah, we were going to look at State of JS survey results. Maybe if you could find that quickly, we could do that. I didn't go that far. And we were going to see if Astro had stepped up its usage base over previous years versus Next. I remember that, yes. And Amy, you weren't here for last year's New Year's party because you're a new party animal. You joined at the most inopportune time.
So I think I'm the only winner here.
Yeah, pretty much the only way to win is not to play. That's how I usually win, is I just have everybody else make predictions and then I just don't do them myself, so I don't get made fun of. But yeah, you win by not participating, so congratulations to you. I also don't think I did participate. At least I couldn't find anything in the chapters or quick scan of the transcript of things that I predicted. I remember the previous years predicting that the AI plateau would occur. And gosh, I just feel like sometimes I think that's right. And then other times I think it's not right.
I did get those State of JS survey results.
Okay.
So one, Astro continued to rise.
Okay.
It is going up. It has, in 2024, reached 23% response rate for usage, which puts it still at less than half of Next.js, which did stop its meteoric rise and drop off by 2 percentage points. So maybe we could say that Nick got, at least a B plus on that, of like, okay, Next stopped rising,
Right.
started falling, Astro kept rising, but there's a long way to crossover.
I wish I would have predicted that Remix would be a thing in 2025 or 2024 because I don't even know if that's right.
It's like they're taking a nap.
Well, let's say what happened with Remix. So Remix got bought by Shopify, right?
Yep.
And they're using it at Shopify. But then does it go silent or is there no activity or just...
They decided they quote, take a nap. So they also do React Router, and they found that they were basically putting the same bit of code in both. And React Router has so much historic pull within the React community that they decided to go all in on React Router and let Remix, quote, take a nap. But I think the idea is that they're going to pour a lot more resources into React Router and then turn Remix more into like the framework pieces, whatever that means, whether that's like framework adjacent stuff or whatever, but they're going to let React Router shine a little bit more than it was with Remix.
I do feel like when we talked with Kent C. Dodds at the conference a couple months ago that it shipped on JS Party, he was excited about some of the work they were doing with React Server components. Maybe that was coming out under the auspices of React Router rather than under Remix. I'm not sure, but kind of having a second opinion and not just having Next be the only people doing anything with React Server components. And so there's something going on in that space.
Yeah, but this is the main problem because depending on who you ask, like you can't figure out what's actually happening. Because I do remember that conversation, and I think that like the RSC stuff is more specifically React 19, but maybe taking some turn with that within React Router. But then like the Remix stuff in React Router, is that just framework mode in there? Because they have library and framework mode now. And then I heard that Remix would be like their RSC framework that they build now that React 19 is out. But who knows if that will ever ship or what it would be. So I think there's a there's a message that's lost somewhere in here.
Well, I think the main message is that RSC and SSR and all that stuff in order to get that technology to work is hard, because I would have put my bet on RSC and all that stuff taking off within this past year. But there's really no other framework right now that offers that as a production ready option. I think Expo is probably the one that's getting the closest, but that's probably also why Next didn't lose as much market shares, because that's really the only framework that you can use RSC in. I mean, it also took the React team a year to like release the final version of, or not final version, but officially let 19 be what it's supposed to be. I mean, it's been in beta all year.
Mm-hmm.
To the extent that Next released dependent on a non-production version of it.
Right. Is it all worth it? Is all this worth it?
No.
No, I don't do JavaScript anymore. It's not worth it.
This is why we have to end the show, because it's just not worth it anymore for y'all. We kid a little bit, but
I will say RSC is pretty amazing. So obviously I work on the Redwood JS core team, and because I worked on the Redwood JS core team, I try and make sure that I understand all of the frameworks and everything that they're doing. That way I can better educate people on Redwood, knowing, well, Next does this, or Remix does this, or this is when you would want to reach for Astro. And so I've been building a project on Next with their app router, and the RSC stuff is really nice. Like, I'm a huge fan of GraphQL. That's really what Redwood stuff is built on, but you have to do a lot. You have to write mutations and queries and like create a use Apollo hook to write a function to send it off. And the fact that you can just like write your server query right there within your component is really nice. Like, it's a lot less code. So I understand the draw that people have for RSCs and saying this is the future.
have you found yourself ever getting confused about what's going on there?
I don't find myself getting confused as much as I do just walking in these mental circles. So I'll start a new project and it'll be like, oh, it'd be really nice to write this in Redwood because then I get GraphQL and Storybook and testing, all this stuff built in. But then I can move faster if I have Next with RSC and all these other pieces. But then the fact that Astro ships with less JavaScript and will compile everything down, that's really nice. The fact that it has Markdown support built in. But then like the server loader action pattern that Remix has is really smooth and it's very clear what's on the server and what's on the client. So then I end up walking in circles, which is not helpful to anyone or my projects. It's like sometimes you just have to pick a technology and stick with it. And it's like everybody has their pros and cons. You just get comfortable with where those edges are and then you just push through the hard parts instead of constantly just walking in circles.
I feel like you've just described quite eloquently why so many developers never ship any blog posts, but they ship their blog 10 times.
Called out.
How many different versions of your blog has there been, Nick?
Oh, at least 6. Yeah.
And how many have used PHP to write the comments directly into
just one.
The best one.
Oh dear.
You know, there's a lore or a myth in golf. I think it came from some pithy book that somebody wrote that the very first swing that you take is like your perfect swing, and the rest of your life you're like trying to find your way back. I don't think it's true at all because I did have a good swing one time. Anyways, I don't know if it's true at all. It's probably not because you don't know how to golf yet. How could you swing good? It's stupid, but I'm starting to think maybe that's true with Nick Nisi's blog. You know, like the first one you wrote, that very first one where the PHP rewrote itself and the comments and everything, like that might have been the apex of Nick Nisi's blog.
Might have been. I went to the Wayback Machine to see if they had any remnants of it, and not that version.
That's a crying shame, Nick. It's a crying shame.
Isn't this what we're all reaching for now? And we're talking about, building AIs that can build new AIs. We're all trying to get the PHP that rewrites its own file.
We are.
Jerod, I want to ask you about a prediction.
Okay.
I know you didn't have, you said you at least don't remember one, and I certainly don't. But I feel like you have been having a bit of a renaissance lately as I've been listening to you on other programs.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Say more.
You're more into Vim, right? NeoVim?
True.
You're taking a look at it, at least. You've switched off of terminal.app, which is...
This is true. Yeah, I'm evolving. This is the evolution of a man. Keep going.
Ooh, I want to hear about that because I'm still there.
I got shamed into it, KBall. I got shamed out of it. Shamed in, shamed out. Do you have more to say, Nick? Or you want me to talk about terminal.app?
I do. And I'm like, the only piece left of that trifecta would be to move to TypeScript. But is TypeScript moving to you?
Oh,
that's if we were continuing this show, that would be the prediction I would make, is that Jerod will be writing full TypeScript without knowing it by the end of the year.
Without knowing it.
That might be the case because, I have found as I use Zed every once in a while, it's telling me stuff that I wouldn't know otherwise, and I'm like, is your TypeScript, peeking out under the covers there? Because the way I write my code, you shouldn't know this about my code. It doesn't have any sort of information like this available to you.
I think that there's been two big things that just came out like towards the end of the year that is making that prediction for you. And the first is that Node will, in 23, so in coming soon to the stable version, will let you just run TypeScript files. And it won't do any type checking. It'll just erase the types and then run the code. Which is awesome because it removes one step. But then
it's almost the kind of code I want.
Yeah.
Erase the types and then run the code. I mean, you're close. You're very close.
Close. The other piece is I think it was just last week that the TypeScript team announced a new flag, erasable syntax only. So it will disallow you from using things that have a runtime component like enums, and enums come to mind. I'm thinking of, there's another piece that I can't think of right now. But that is all, I think, in service of the typed, what is the name of it? Types as comments?
Type annotations?
Yeah, the TC39 proposal of
that.
I think it's like the balls are rolling. We're not going to be there at the end of 2025, but I think we'll be closer.
What are we going to get first? That or temporal?
That, for sure.
Temporal feels like it falls in the same bucket as fusion power, right? It's always just a certain amount of time in the future.
Yeah. And full self-driving autonomous vehicles are always 18 months away.
Hey, that's the thing when Mr. Zuckerberg said that they're going to have mid-level engineers that are all AI this year. That is his equivalent of full self-driving. That's my prediction.
Meaning he's wrong.
Meaning, yeah, it's always 3 months away.
Right.
Like full self-driving.
I mean, if they want a mid-engineer, I'm for hire. I'm available. They lost a pretty good engineer, didn't they, Nick?
I haven't seen him.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, Zuckerberg hasn't seen him recently either. KBall, you were going to say something.
Well, a few different things that I think might be interesting. One is kind of in the spirit of looking back, and since this is the last JS Party episode ever, I was looking back to the first episodes that at least Nick and I were involved in, which were back in, what was this? March or April of 2027. 2027.
No,
2028. Sorry. April 2028. 2018.
There
I
we
can
go.
talk, honestly. I can
I was
talk.
like, this is some sort of future prediction.
Back to the Future. Oh, which is actually funny because if you think about Back to the Future, if they were going back in time, how much time did they go back? It was 30 years, right?
The first time into the 50s, yeah.
So if they go back, and if that were happening today, they'd be going back to 1995.
No.
That was a glorious year. Let's do it.
Why did you ruin my day?
Windows 95 came out. It was amazing. Remember the Friends advertisement for Windows 95?
We'd be beating down Brendan Eich's door. Hey, don't make that language.
Take more than 10 days. It's worth it.
Yeah. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff we could do around how, we're closer to different times than we once were. But yeah, college students today, graduating college students, none of them were born when 9/11 happened.
Yes.
Yes.
Right. Like there's a whole bunch of that stuff. But we're talking to developers. They're all young anyway.
Don't do that to us. Yeah. I mean, we're old codgers at this point.
We're old codgers, but this is kind of what I want to do. So looking back at those first episodes of JS Party that Nick and I were on back a mammoth 2018. So that's 7 years ago. Mm-hmm. What has changed in that time? What were we talking about at the time? Any guesses?
We were talking about React and TypeScript. That's all I was talking about. I haven't
That's all I was talking about. That just summarizes Nick's life for the last decade.
Had React come out yet? React was out, right?
2013 was React.
Okay. I was building WordPress blogs in 2016.
React was out, but and actually Next was out as well. The first Next version was in 2016, looks like. So we had those things have stayed the same. One thing that hasn't, we were talking about Bootstrap and wondering if CSS Grid was going to change how everyone was using Bootstrap.
So CSS Grid did change things, but Bootstrap kind of went away on its own path.
The Tailwind revolution. When did that happen?
That's more recent, right? It just hit version 4. So I'm going to say it's probably like 5 years old. But it didn't pick up steam until maybe 2 years ago. I'm just making stuff up now.
I think that's a big one. I think we were already talking about temporal. So
highly likely.
As you predict when that's going to land. And I was also noticing we were talking about USB access, web USB, and some of these other like taking JavaScript out from being just web related. That's a trend that I think has continued to flourish of JavaScript everywhere.
Yeah, talking about Johnny 5, Arduinos. I remember PWAs was a thing back then. Progressive web apps. Like, what are progressive web apps?
That's kind of died, right?
Yeah, to a certain extent. Web versus mobile, right? Like the iPhone App Store versus web apps. And can the web do more as a platform for mobile?
Yeah. When did React Native get big? Because that seems to be continuing down. And you have Expo is really making waves. You have like... what was it? Blue Sky was the first Expo app that was top of the App Store for a while. And there's a bunch of other Expo apps happening.
So React Native's initial launch was 2015, but you asked when it got big. And I remember making a splash right away. Obviously, it had Facebook behind it. And solved a problem that a lot of people had. And React was already gaining steam. So I'm not sure if it came out of the gate steamy or if it built steam over time, but 2015. So definitely was out and available back when we rebooted the pod. But Amy was just writing PHP. Now, Amy, did you, with your PHP?
I was writing jQuery.
Okay. Hey, I wrote some jQuery the other day, so.
I was just thinking, when was that Google like language for mobile that was supposed to make it easier for news sites to load and work?
Was it?
No, it wasn't Flutter, but
AMP?
Yes. That was terrible.
That came and died. When did that start?
Google AMP. That's because they would like rehost your pages on their own infrastructure, right?
And I was thinking about 2016. I was also working on a project where we had to like recode the entire site in AMP, and it was miserable.
I remember seeing that and being like, no thanks. I did not want them to rehost my site. Thank you very much. But they had a big carrot behind it because it was going to get you better search results. Mm-hmm. And that's just like pure money, right?
Yep. And load everything faster.
Yep.
The moral of the story was they eventually got rid of that version of the site. So that died along with the language.
It's crazy how a company of that stature and resources and skills and everything could still create a turd like that. You know, like not saying like the technology was bad or even maybe the idea wasn't bad, but like they still couldn't get the market to actually accept it, you know, like it just.
Well, I'm sure part of it was the developer experience, right? Which I think also says something about the code and the projects that we work on. Is it has to feel good to work on and work in.
I think that's a good point. I think back when we first rebooted the show, developer experience was not a common term in our industry. And now it's like there's developer experience conferences, there's companies called DX, just one at least. And there's a heavy focus on that as like a core aspect of, developer facing products and services, right?
What's up, nerds? I'm here with Kurt Mackey, co-founder and CEO of Fly. You know we love Fly. So, Kurt, I want to talk to you about the magic of the cloud. You have thoughts on this, right?
Right. I think it's valuable to understand the magic behind a cloud because you can build better features for users, basically, if you understand that. You can do a lot of stuff, particularly now that people are doing LLM stuff, but you can do a lot of stuff if you get that and can be creative with it.
So when you say clouds aren't magic because you're building a public cloud for developers and you go on to explain exactly how it works, what does that mean to you?
In some ways, it means these all came from somewhere. Like there was a simpler time before clouds where we'd get a server at Rack Shack and we'd SSH it or telnet into it even and put files somewhere and run the web servers ourselves to serve them up to users. Clouds are not magic on top of that. They're just more complicated ways of doing those same things in a way that meets the needs of a lot of people instead of just one. One of the things I think that people miss out on, and a lot of this is actually because AWS and GCP have created such big black box abstractions. Like Lambda is really black boxy. You can't like pick apart Lambda and see how it works from the outside. You have to sort of just use what's there. But the reality is like Lambda is not all that complicated. It's just a modern way to launch little VMs and serve some requests from them and let them like kind of pause and resume and free up like physical compute time. The interesting thing about understanding how clouds work is it lets you build kind of features for your users you never would expect it. And our canonical version of this for us is that like when we looked at how we wanted to isolate user code, we decided to just expose this machines concept, which is a much lower level abstraction than Lambda that you could use to build Lambda on top of. And what machines are is just these VMs that are designed to start really fast, or designed to stop and then restart really fast, or designed to suspend sort of like your laptop does when it closes and resume really fast when you tell them to. And what we found is that giving people those primitives actually, there's like new apps being built that couldn't be built before, specifically because we went so low level and made such a minimal abstraction on top of generally like Linux kernel features. A lot of our platform is actually just exposing a nice UX around Linux kernel features, which I think is kind of interesting. But like you still need to understand what they're doing to get the most use out of them.
Very cool. Okay, so experience the magic of Fly and get told the secrets of Fly because that's what they want you to do. They want to share all the secrets behind the magic of the Fly cloud, the cloud for productive developers, the cloud for developers who ship. Learn more and get started for free at fly.io. Again, fly.io.
My new official title is Developer Experience Engineer.
Oh, wow. What are you doing?
JavaScript, mostly.
GitHub issues.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's funny that you think that they couldn't produce a turd like that, a company that big. Let me introduce you to Gemini.
Oh,
Whole AI strategy.
Gauntlet thrown. I haven't tried Gemini. I've largely stayed away from Google's AI stuff ever since they had like the Black George Washington thing. I was just like, these guys aren't ready for prime time here.
Well, if you remember, the V1 name of it was Bard, which is
I do remember
terrible
Bard.
name.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking back to this too, and I did the 2025 thing when you're reminiscing as I asked Claude what was big in 2018, and it says that HTTPS essentially became essential.
Let's Encrypt.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Let's Encrypt was world changing.
Yeah. While we talk, Nick, ask Claude what happened in 2028 in the world of JavaScript and web development.
I mean, part of why this is interesting is looking back, like that seems like a whole different world. So if we're going to like project forward, where do we see this going? I predict if we look forward 7 years, 99% of software code is generated by LLMs rather than written by humans.
It's funny that you say 99% because I just covered a story in news where a pull request was opened against llama.cpp, which is a low-level C and C++ program that was doubling performance of some SIMD instructions, lower level than I even understood that the code was. Obviously, the people working on it understood. and they opened up a very large pull request that doubled the performance of this particular subsystem, and it was 99% written by DeepSeek. And the opener of the request said all I had to do was prompt it, provide a couple tests, and just guide it along the way, and here's your code. And I was like, that's pretty impressive. And that's 2025 style. So you're thinking 2032, 7 years down the road. Yeah, I think that could be the case. What'd Claude say, Nick?
It's only giving me propaganda about the 2028 Olympics.
The Olympics. I thought you were going to say the election. I was like, well, either way, it'd be propaganda. Yeah, that's funny. I don't know what's going to happen, but probably this country is going to win in the downhill.
Oh, it does say Gartner predicts significant advancement in generative AI, with 40% of major companies expected to implement digital twin profiles for employee skills and behaviors.
Digital twin profiles? That's like straight up weirdness.
That sounds like a bad idea. I mean,
when has that ever stopped us?
I am a huge advocate of these tools for a lot of use cases, but I will say that most of the ideas being put out there by leaders in Gen AI of what they think the future should look like with these tools are terrible ideas. Like, these are really useful things. We should be figuring out how to use them to make our lives better. I'm not sure that like Sam Altman and some of these other folks who are putting that out realize just how dystopian they sound when they are projecting what they think that world should look like.
It's getting harder and harder to get attention on the internet, you know? So sometimes you have to say the most outlandish, most dystopian or utopian in your mind stuff in order to get a headline or a viral post or something. So I take a lot of that with a grain of salt. I don't think they even believe half the crap they're putting out.
You know, though, thinking back to our time together in New York, KBall, I just kept getting bashed over the head, mostly by you, but by pretty much everyone else. Cursor. I still haven't touched it, but
and you're still gainfully employed.
Somewhat, yeah. But it did like enlighten me to at least look for this workflow. My main problem with Cursor is I don't want to use VS Code,
same,
or their fork.
Also, my main problem with it, and yet I still ended up going over to it because I could see when I started getting used to using it, such improvements in my productivity.
Yeah. And I'm getting the same improvements now, but in the comfort of NeoVim. And it's working quite well. I'm using a plugin called Avanti, and I just had to give it an Anthropic key and put $25 on that, and it's going to town. But it has changed the way that I write code, which is I just talk about my code a lot with a robot rather than writing it. Like probably 60% of the time is just talking about it, and then I write it, but it's like I have somebody always there, always listening. And a lot of times, yeah, it's complete crap that it's giving me back. So like, that's where the skill set comes in of like distinguishing pretty quickly. Like, I don't think you know what you're talking about here and going the right way. But at the end of the day, it is so much better than staring at a blank terminal or blank file editor and starting from scratch on something, especially when it's like, I just know I need to do, this quick thing, like a reduce. And I know how to do it. I'm just being lazy, so I can just have the computer do it. And it is changing the way that I write code and the way that I interact with everything. Is it good? I don't know.
Right. At what level are you using this though? Like if you were to characterize a reduce call versus write me a method versus create a series of classes that interact or a module system, or like what level of your code abstraction are you generally operating at?
I think I'm at the top and the bottom, the high level and the low level. So meaning a lot of those reduce calls, like the simple stuff, I have that. I also have Copilot that's still in there, just trying its darndest.
Just doing stuff. Like, hey, you like this? How about this?
It's pretty awful. But and then at a high level, like a lot of times I will describe like, hey, I'm thinking about making this change to the code. And sometimes I'll just give it the code. Like in Avanti, I can just, the file that I'm at, I can just say at file or at I can give it context on all of the files that I'm asking about.
Right.
And then ask like, I think that this would be better if I provided this kind of callback here. What are the pros and cons of doing that? And I have like a high level architecture discussion on that. But then the middle area where I'm not writing those low level things and I'm not doing the architecture by myself, it's kind of like the general implementation is where I'm still like fully in charge and doing things without any AI.
Amy, you're nodding along. Are you having similar experiences, or does it resonate with you? Or
Yeah, so a few weeks ago, KBall, you mentioned Cursor, and like that at command changed everything for me and sent me on a deep dive with Cursor. Like, what all can it do? And it's pretty amazing. And some of it, I think, still comes down to your context window and the information that you provided. So that's interesting that you're talking about this high level and low level, because part of that journey, like I realized there's such a thing as a .cursor rules file. Amazing. So what this file is you can put it in any project you're working on, and Cursor, the website, has a directory of all these different files that people have created. And so in it, it says like, I'm on a Next 15 app router project using Tailwind that uses ShadCN and Radix and all this other stuff. And so then when it makes suggestions, it's going to give you suggestions that are aligned with that framework. And you can also outline, this is my folder structure. So it knows this is where I want my components to live. This is where I want my pages to live. And so the feedback that it's giving you is a lot better. So when you're talking about a high level perspective, like that's where all of that content lives. So it's pretty amazing. You can also, which I didn't realize, set a file inside your Cursor settings to say, this is generally how I like to code, or this is the type of response that I want. And so I found a tweet that somebody on the Cursor team had provided and said, this is what I use in my Cursor settings file. So I copied and pasted that, tweaked it a little bit. But the main difference was it was asking for more direct and terse explanations. And so when you're talking about just trying to get to the code as fast as possible, that really helped cut down on its feedback. Or, Cursor, wow, that's a great question. Like it'll cut all that out and just give you your answer. The other thing is the documentation. If there's not the documentation for whatever technology you're using in their repo, you can say, here is a link to the docs, and it'll go to that website and scrape all the documentation, which is also really interesting. So I have used it on a few projects to write all of the code if it's a side project. So for example, a couple weekends ago, Raycast released Raycast Focus. And so I thought, this would be interesting if we had like a refocus app. So a lot of times if I'm heads down on something and I know I have to step away to say, walk the dogs, I don't want to do that because I know I'm going to get distracted. I'm not going to sit back down and work on what I was working on. I'll lose that focus. And so I was like, I just want a reminder in the middle of my computer to say, this is what you were working on. This is what you need to go back to. I've never written a Raycast extension before. And so I did all that with AI in about an hour, and it ended up writing an Apple script, which I'm not very proficient in Apple script. But the fact that it could just do all that by itself was pretty incredible.
One of the things that we've experimented with that is very interesting in this domain is like one of the places where LLM-based coding agents are really good is like translate this thing into this language, right? So translate across languages. So we started experimenting with, we have a contractor who's proficient in Python, and our main systems are using Golang and Ruby and TypeScript. And we said, nah, you're doing an experimental thing, write it in Python. We get the deliverable and we say, Cursor, translate this Python into Ruby using these guidelines. And it'll just go, and suddenly the language of development for the original development is far less important because you can translate it in 30 minutes.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But I still don't quite know. Sarah Drasner said this, and this sums it up so well, was she had just made the point, like, I like coding. I like the job that I do. I liked my craft. And it's not that I want to be resistant towards the future or whatever comes next. I think that there'll still be a job. It'll just look different. The question is, I don't know that I like my different job. And I think that's still to be determined.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of questions around what does it look like when you're doing this. I was talking with somebody about who is on the older side about what it was like when compiled languages first came out, where they were having to shift from literally writing programs using assembler instruction by instruction to these higher level abstractions. It's a very different way of thinking about it, but it is still programming. And you made that shift. I've found for me writing code with LLMs, I actually have to be careful the right amount that I ask it to do, not only because if you give it too much without the right things, it can go off the rails, but also because just my brain won't keep up. and it's both less fun, and then if I have to come back and change or modify this, I'm less able to do it, right? Like, so I will ask it in a chat-oriented way to do something, but I found that for me, it typically has to be one conceptual transformation at a time. So my brain is still mutating the code. And the fact I'm not doing the keystrokes to change it ends up being less important than like, I'm able to do it at a size that is my brain is still doing the same types of functioning that it was doing before, if that makes sense. If I ask it to implement the whole thing, that's neither fun nor often the right solution, unless it's a throwaway or a one-time script or something like that, where I'm not going to need to maintain it over time.
Well, and I think, that's the point with that Raycast extension was it was very small. And so when you talk about the cursor being able to hold all of that in context, it was able to do that because it wasn't a large application. It was also a side project. So I didn't have to worry about branding. I didn't have certain specifications that a lot of times if we're working for companies or there's branding and specs and all those things involved, sometimes it's harder to get the exact response that you're looking for when you need it to fit those specifications.
I think that maintenance aspect is key because so much of what we do is maintenance, and it's one thing to create something, but then to like maintain it, there's like another level of understanding or care. I don't know what it is, but I find that once you detach yourself from the nitty gritty, which more and more, so you can do, obviously we're still checking and making sure, no, don't write it like this, write it like that. I assume those kind of changes eventually kind of go away to where we're doing that way less with our LLMs, and like the code they spit out the first time is actually like, dang, better than I could do. But then we don't grok it ever. Like we grok the outputs or, the test suite passes. And there's this interesting study that came out recently on metacognitive laziness. And this is the danger of using generative AI with learning specifically, because you actually tend not to learn very well from them, even though they have all the information. It's just almost too easy. It's like they just tell you the answer and you're like, cool. And then you don't learn it because there was no actual going and getting it. And I just wonder over time, I think the answer to that problem is like, well, they have to get better so that we don't have to actually do that. We just can stay at a higher level. But I don't think that that is where we have plateaued, at least for now.
I disagree pretty vehemently with the idea that they have to get better so we don't have to. I think we have to figure out how to learn these things in a way that use these things in a way that we're still learning. I mean, on the coding side, like the biggest thing I've seen, biggest difference I've seen between people who are able to use these things really like get orders of magnitude productivity boosts versus like incremental is you don't turn your brain off. You don't just let it do all the things. You figure out how to like use it to more rapidly inform your brain. But I think because it's so easy to turn your brain off, we don't have that instinct. So like, I think maybe that's a UI tool builder problem. Like maybe applying these directly in the tools that we've previously done leads to this. I think if we leave it up to the end user, we're probably doomed because most of us are lazy and we will be lazy by default. But I don't think the answer is for the tools to get better enough we don't have to care. I think that we need to figure out how we can use these tools in a way that helps us think better rather than turning our brains off.
Do you know how many developers literally copy paste their answers from Stack Overflow and just put it in their program? And then they're like, how does this work? Like, I don't know, but it worked. So I moved on. I mean, that's going to be the next thing. Only obviously Stack Overflow is dying a quick death, but it's going to be the same. Like there's so many people, like anybody who, all four of us were not, or three of us, and you were nodding along in agreement as you said that, KBall. That's like the 1% of developers that actually are going to be, because everyone else is like, yeah, I'm busy. I'm going to go to happy hour. So I'm just going to paste it in there. It worked. Ship it. Let's move on. I'm not going to learn it. Why do I have to learn it? It works like 98% of the time.
There's always been that stigma around, like, I don't want people to know that I pasted from Stack Overflow, right? So I will manually type this in.
It's called shame.
Yeah. I will manually type this in so that
I'll change a few characters just in case.
Won't have that comment there. No, things like that. But it's like, I mean, part of that was like an exercise in like, if I'm typing this out, it is forcing me to go line by line and understand and kind of at least give me the opportunity to critique as I'm going line by line. It just slows me down enough to not do that. But there's always like that stigma of like, oh, I don't want people to know that I had to Stack Overflow to get this. Do you feel like there's that same stigma for AI tools, like KBall, if you just ask Cursor to rewrite this, whatever, and does it feel like you wrote it? Does it matter?
It's a good question. I think at the end of the day, what matters is, does it get the outcome that you're looking for? Where I think there's always been a difference between like the developers who are just copying and pasting versus the other is in the same domain that Jerod, you're pointing at, which is maintenance, is being able to evolve a system over time, right? The best developers have a more or less complete and evolving mental model of what their software does, how it relates to the business problem it's solving, the mental model of that problem itself, and like the ways in which those things interact. And what that enables you to do is see possibilities. It enables you to see how you can evolve the system to address different problems, to address those problems better. If you don't understand any of that, you don't have any of that visibility. So that differential is already there. This probably exacerbates it because I have seen, you look at like somebody who's doing this very visibly and publicly, I think is Simon Willison. He is supporting like 300 different open source projects and doing all these other things. He's like 100x'd his productivity by using LLMs. He's doing it really well. And I think he's not unique. I've seen other developers who are able to take these tools and use them to do ungodly amounts of work. So this concept of a 10x developer that for so long has been like an argument thing. Like I think when you talk about how do you effectively use LLM based tools, you can get to 100x, and that's going to have an impact. That's going to mean that if you're in that copy and paste and just accept and don't think about it mode, like you are going to be replaced by someone else who's able to use these things more effectively and keep evolving the system. And we're seeing company after company at the big scale saying we're not hiring engineers now because we're seeing such productivity boons from this. Like I think that is a challenge that we have to face. Now the opportunity here is now we can be in a world of abundance when it comes to software, right? You can run a very effective software company on 2, 3, 4 engineers and do a heck of a lot if those engineers are really embracing these tools and understanding how to do all this amazing stuff. And that opens a ton of places and opportunities where the economics wouldn't have worked before because software development was too expensive. Mm-hmm. But if you're just blindly applying the tools, like I think this is a period where like there's going to be a shakeout.
You hear that, y'all? Don't let that instinct, that copy paste instinct, that take it away cursor instinct, don't let that take over. You have to feel the shame and rise above or be replaced.
Well, if it writes some code for you, that's fine. And you have to answer the question, do I understand this code? And if the answer is no, you're not done. And maybe the way that you get to understand it is actually using an LLM. One of the places I think these things are really cool for maintenance is like I can hop into a code base I haven't touched in 6 months. I don't remember how things are. I can open up Cursor and say, wait, how is this thing working again? And it will go and it will find the right things and it'll give me a bunch of good information and a jumping off point. And then I can say, okay, great. I need this to change in this way. Find me where else it needs to, like, it's incredible in terms of hopping in and like not having that massive code context switching cost of this is a 12-month-old or a 6-month-old code base I haven't touched in that long. But you do have to ask yourself that question, like, do I understand what this is doing? And if the answer is no, don't push it. I mean, we've been telling junior devs that for a long time, right? Like, did you test your code? Do you know how it works? Why did you push this in a PR?
Have you guys seen Good Will Hunting?
Yes. A long time ago.
KBall probably hasn't. Come on, KBall. Well, there's this particular scene. So Will Hunting, that's Matt Damon's character, KBall. He's a savant. He's a intellectually brilliant person, can do math like a whiz kid. And he gets put to work on these advanced math equations that nobody else could solve and these theorems and stuff. And he's working with a guy who's like an accomplished mathematician. He's got like awards and he's like the smartest guy in the room all the time. And he's doing stuff that for Will is very, very easy. But for everybody else in the world, it's very hard. And he's like a very smart mathematician. And so for him, it's hard to understand. For Will, he's like, and there's a whole scene where he gets mad. Will takes the proof and he's like throws it in the fire. He's like, this is so easy for me. You have any idea how easy this is? And he's like practically crying. He's like, because he wants to understand. And I say all that because like, isn't that going to be us with our tools pretty soon where it's like, okay, you wrote the code. Now, could you please tell me what you're doing here? Because I'd like to understand how you did that. And these things are going to be like, you simpleton. How many times do I have to explain myself to you? Just go away. Be gone. I will take care of everything from here. You have no idea what I'm talking about.
I mean, the other thing that's possible that we could explore is maybe the programming languages we're writing today are not the right programming languages to be writing in this world. Because going back to that other metaphor, how many of us understand the assembly that's generated by the code that we write? Very few. But we still have code that expresses the higher level of concepts and abstractions that we're trying to write, that we understand those abstractions. And we may not understand the way that's mapped into an implementation, but the compilers are good enough we can rely on them. They pretty much always work. It's pretty rare that you have to dive through the levels of, oh shoot, this compiler is actually generating bad assembly, so my abstraction isn't being rendered properly. So maybe the answer is actually we need to develop that next level of abstraction, which is how we express the conceptual abstractions we're implementing to an LLM. And then the LLM writes JavaScript or Golang or whatever. And there's a whole aside on like, what are the right good language targets for LLMs? Like I think actually Golang is a great target because it's relatively simple. It's strongly typed, it's fast to compile, it's fast to test. And so you can do a lot of validation of the generated code automatically. And it's fairly explicit, so it can't get too clever. Like I'm using an LLM to write a lot of Ruby. And like when it tries to do metaprogramming, you're like, whoa, what the heck are you doing?
Mm-hmm. You got to smoke a doobie to keep up, one of those. That's interesting you say that because I actually asked Chris Brando from the Fall Through podcast on Changelog and Friends. Fall Through is the Go Time spinoff pod for those listening. Much like Dysfunctional, we should get to that, is going to be the JS Party spinoff pod. So if you're listening this far and you're like, I can't believe this is the last JS Party ever, the single tear is rolling down your cheek. Have no fear. The spirit of JS Party lives on in the Dysfunctional podcast, starring KBall, Nick Nisi, and Amy, like the whole crew pretty much. Except for yours truly, who would love to be a guest whenever you guys aren't talking about TypeScript. And anyways, so that's coming. Dysfunctional is coming, so stay tuned for that. We'll talk about it more in detail. But I asked Chris the question about, is Go a good output language for an LLM? And I will tell you, he said no. So maybe go listen to that, KBall, and see why he thinks that as a Go expert himself. Interesting conversation. I do think there's like some missing layer in here where it's like not English or your native tongue, and it's not TypeScript, of course, but it's like some sort of pseudocode in between that we could talk, which is easier than what we're currently doing, but more formal than just like me typing out, hey, computer, do this. That I think might be the sweet spot. What do y'all think about that?
Jerod, are you proposing AppleScript?
Amy seems to like it.
It was like, that would be the one time where we were talking about somebody just taking whatever code. I didn't even read the AppleScript that it created because it was just a side project.
That's a beautiful thing. If you don't have to read it, that's a successful move.
But if you did, it's very readable. Tell application whatever.
Tell application to say this thing, yeah.
I was going to say, to KBall's point, my favorite thing with code recently when it makes a suggestion is when I say, why did you do that? And it will tell me, and I'm like, oh, and it feels like suddenly I have a teacher again that I haven't had, in 20 years that I can just ask questions to. So.
Yeah.
It's so annoying. Like it's so, I don't know. What's the opposite of condescending? That's
obsequious.
That's where those, that cursor settings file is. You can say in there, do not be condescending to me.
Don't you dare be condescending to me.
It won't. Well, it's wonderful.
I'd rather it be condescending to me because I'm like, I ask it a question and it's like, oh, I think that this would be a great idea. And then I point out some very obvious flaw. And it's like, you're absolutely right. We should do this.
So in your settings file, it should be like, stand up for yourself more. Like,
but it's also like when I'm doing
have some conviction.
When I'm doing this, it's not like I'm an expert on this, right? I'm asking the LLM because I'm not an expert. And so I'm just asking like, hey, is this actually the way that like a Next developer would do this? And it's like, oh, you're absolutely right. And I'm like, are you just telling me I'm right? Or are you actually like scanning to see like, yes, Next developers do prefer this pattern?
No, it's just telling you.
I know. And that's the problem.
Exactly.
they're still a little dysfunctional, these tools.
Oh,
good plug.
Good segue. Let's talk about dysfunctional.fm.
Well, friends, I'm here with a friend of mine, Michael Greenwich, co-founder and CEO of WorkOS. We're big fans of WorkOS here. Michael, tell me about AuthKit. What is this? How does it work? Why'd you make it?
WorkOS has been building stuff in authentication for a long time, since the very beginning. But we really focused initially on just enterprise auth, single sign-on, SAML authentication. But a year or two into that, we heard from more people that they wanted all the auth stuff covered. Two-factor auth, password auth, with blocking passwords that have been reused. They wanted auth with, other third-party systems. And they wanted really WorkOS to handle all the business logic around tying together identities, provisioning users, and even more advanced things like role-based access control and permissions. So we started thinking about that more, how we could offer it as an API. And then we realized we had this amazing experience with Radix, with this API, really the component system for building front-end experiences for developers. Radix is downloaded tens of millions of times every month for doing exactly this. So we glued those two things together and we built AuthKit. So AuthKit is the easiest way to add auth to any app, not just Next.js if you're building a Rails app or a Django app or a just straight up Express app or something. It comes with a hosted login box. So you can customize that, you can style it. You can build your own login experience too. It's extremely modular. You can just use the backend APIs in a headless fashion. But out of the box, it gives you everything you need to be able to serve customers. And it's tied into the WorkOS platform, so you can really, really quickly add any enterprise features you need. So we have a lot of companies that start using it because they anticipate they're going to grow up market and want to serve enterprise. And they don't want to have to re-architect their auth stack when they do that. So it's kind of a way to future-proof your auth system for your future growth. And we had people that have done that. People that started off and they're like, oh, I'm just kicking the tires, I'm just doing this. And then poof, their app gets a bunch of traction, starts growing. It's awesome. And they go close Coinbase or Disney or United Airlines, or, it's like a major customer. And instead of saying, oh, no, sorry, we don't have any of these enterprise things and we're going to have to rebuild everything, just go into the WorkOS dashboard and check a box and you're done.
Aside from the fact that AuthKit is just awesome, the real awesome thing is that it is free for up to 1 million users. Yes, 1 million monthly active users are included in this out of the gate. So use it from day one, and when you need to scale to enterprise, you're already ready. Too easy. You can learn more at authkit.com or, of course, workos.com. Big fans, check it out. 1 million users for free? Wow. WorkOS.com or AuthKit.com.
Let's talk about dysfunctional.fm. Why this name? I figure you guys are going to broaden. It's not going to be JS talk the whole time. So, but the word function is in there. So it's going to be Cody, but then it's dysfunction. So I'm thinking now I don't know what it's going to be about. So tell me more about the name dysfunctional. We'll talk about what y'all are thinking.
Real quick, I just want to say that we did move beyond a JS specific name because we're writing less JavaScript as a whole, as a group. And so we wanted to be able to broaden our horizons. And basically at this point, I'm copying exactly what was on that last changelog in Friends because they said the exact same thing.
Oh, so they beat you to it. They're definitely on the ball. If we had to compare spinoffs right now, and not necessarily any fault of your own, but fall through, them folks are on top. They got 5 episodes out and they're doing video. They've got a cast of characters that's a mile long, but let's talk about your guys' podcast.
I was going to say, do we want to talk about the behind the scenes of the sort of, yes, we are, no, we aren't, yes, we are, no, we aren't, JS party side of things that makes dysfunctional seem so dysfunctional right now? Or
no, let's talk about the future of dysfunctional and how awesome it's going to be when we get it out there, which first episodes are being scheduled to record. And yes, it's going beyond JavaScript and the web.
So the core thinking behind the name dysfunctional was actually kind of tied into an experience Nick and I both had. And then we were talking with people at a conference, and after we had just learned, JS Party is going to go off the air, and we're sort of doing our market research of wait, what is missing out there? And one of the things with most podcasts in this space and conferences and all of these is they're extremely aspirational. We go and we interview one of the core team members on Next or on Redwood or on something else, and it's talking about the cutting edge and where things are. And then we go back to our day jobs and we're still centering a div or whatever the equivalent is in our local environment and language. And like feeling like there's a disconnect. Like it's important to have that aspirational content, but there's not enough stuff out there talking about what is the day to day of working as a developer in a variety of different settings and companies. And what's more, how often that feels dysfunctional. Right? I think there's a reason that these like, yes, I blew up prod on my first day, like stories are so popular because we've all had that experience, but we don't necessarily all want to broadcast that experience, and it can make it then feel isolating. If you're out there and you're like, man, I'm hearing these people talking about all this amazing cutting edge content, and here I am like still working on PHP or whatever it might be. So that's, I think, the thinking behind dysfunctional. And it's something that I think we all identify with of like, you know, it's great to show up on a show like this and be like, I'm KBall from JS Party. Like I've had people be like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And I'm like, dude, I'm just a guy. I still screw up and break things and all this stuff. Like I'm dysfunctional at heart as well.
Anything to add or subtract, Amy or Nick?
Did you catch the functional part of dysfunctional? We'll talk about that too.
Functional programming. It's a show about functional programming.
I mean, being functional as well.
Oh, functioning.
Yeah.
As you go about your programming.
We're functioning adults mostly.
Yeah. Will there be any ahoy hoys?
Absolutely.
Are you taking that with you? I mean, I feel like that's yours.
That's a Nick Nisi. Like you can ask ChatGPT and it will tell you that Nick Nisi says ahoy hoy.
Does it really?
Wow.
That's amazing. I'm gonna go ask it that. What do you say? What does Nick Nisi say?
Let's see. Who is Nick Nisi?
What is Nick Nisi's tagline? Is it a tagline, Nick? What do you call that? A call sign.
Yeah. It's like
What is Nick Nisi's call sign?
rappers do that in their songs, right? DJ Khaled or, you know, like something like that.
I don't think any rappers say ahoy hoy in their songs, Nick. That's just
Yet. Coming soon.
I was curious if it even knew who I was. Yeah. It's close, but it thinks that I partnered with the University of Northern Iowa.
Oh, really?
Nope.
No. Well, maybe it's going for the other Amy Dutton.
Maybe. It doesn't say anything about fiddle playing, though.
All right. So here's ChatGPT. I couldn't find any information indicating that Nick Nisi has a call sign. He is a JavaScript / TypeScript developer from Omaha, Nebraska, and a panelist on the JS Party podcast. He's also active on social media platforms such as Instagram and X, formerly Twitter. What does he say at the start of JS Party episodes? Sorry, now I'm just prompting out loud, trying to get ChatGPT into
Maybe
the range.
It doesn't. No, I was blown away. I think Nick introduced me to the realized that he and I are known by ChatGPT. Amy, it sounds like it knows you, but not so well. So I don't know.
It just wanted to throw in it knew everything else except for the University.
Except
of
for that
Iowa.
one.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a typical hallucination. Here's another one. At the beginning of JS Party episodes, Nick Nisi typically introduces himself with a simple hello.
Yeah, I asked Claude and it said that I say, hey, everybody.
In some episodes, he may also share a brief personal update or comment before diving into the main discussion. Bad GPT. Terrible slop.
Sounds dysfunctional.
That does. You guys should have a GPT as your first guest. Is there going to be guests on this new show?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we're going to have some episodes.
You guys didn't.
I was under the assumption that there was.
I don't know. I just kind of see what kind of a show it is. You know, like sometimes some shows are just us talking. You know, maybe you guys are going to do that every time.
Yeah, I think that one thing that we want to try and do is like build the rapport between us as well, because I think some of the best episodes of JS Party are the ones where it's like this. We're just riffing with each other. You know, we have bring our own personalities into it. And like there's a lot of value in talking to guests about like their open source project or whatever. But a lot of times, like it's a lot harder to go deeper than surface level on any of those. So I think that we want to have like a healthy balance between that.
I like it.
I also think it's easier to talk about the things that are going wrong if you've got more of that rapport. So we'll have some guests that we can bring in and be like, all right, so tell me about something really dysfunctional in your day job. And my guess is some people will say, sure, let me go. And others will freeze. And they'll be like, what? No.
Mentally scanning their NDAs.
Exactly, right?
Right.
Now that we've got Nick out of Meta, we're all at places where we can talk about what's wrong.
That's right.
Freedom.
Free Nick. Nick is free. Although probably most of your dysfunctional stories were all up in there. So I feel like there's a treasure trove if you could just tap it. Do you have a statute of limitations on that NDA, Nick? Are you free right now?
Did I sign an NDA?
I don't know. You have to tell us.
I don't know.
All right.
For the most part, it wasn't. It was not any more dysfunctional than any other place.
Fair.
I did love reading your write-up on LinkedIn where you were just kind of transitioning and you were just saying like, this is a normal company just like anybody else's where we're trying to write programming. We're working with other engineers that, yes, they're smart, but we also write bugs. It was very, very human. I appreciated it.
Did you talk about all your bugs during your interview at WorkOS? Did you? Or you waited until they hired you and then you're like, I also write bugs.
Yeah. It was a fun interview process there. It really was. And I did get a chance to shine in a horrible way, like miserably bumble through something during an interview.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Databases are like, I can use them, but I was mostly using a GUI tool to like reset the database and things like that.
Sure.
Which I thought would be bad, but it's what I do day to day.
They were
So
cool with it.
yeah.
Did you come in the door and say, it's me, Nick Nisi from JS Party, ahoy hoy? Went for the simple hello instead.
I thought that
Life update.
WorkOS has been a sponsor of ours. Like we've known those folks for a long time. We have friends over there. So your reputation may have preceded you.
maybe, but I didn't lean on that. And I realized that I never do, which is probably a good thing, but like I never lean into the network that I've been growing too much. And I should maybe change that. But anyway, yeah, I really enjoyed like one thing that I thought was really cool that they had me do that I haven't been through at any other company is they had me go through some of their public documentation and write a friction log on like, here's
That's a cool idea.
like go through it and tell me everything that you hit friction on while you're going through it. And I came up with like 6 pages of things, which is pretty good.
Dang.
Especially for a developer experience role. That's great.
Yeah, totally. Very cool. KBall, what's new in your world?
What's new in my world? I'm writing software with LLMs. I'm writing software that is itself using LLMs. So as you can tell, I'm way deep down in that rabbit hole. Other than that, I've been doing some interviews for Software Engineering Daily, which is fun. Getting the interview bug out, and then on Dysfunctional, we can talk about all the things that I break.
Nice. And Amy, is there anything you're excited about or interested in, looking forward to?
Yeah. So I committed to building 12 projects this year. I have build12.com where I'm just an application a month. And so I'm feeling the heat of the fact that it's the last week in January. But, KBall was talking about that 10x engineer. I've been trying to figure out, okay, how can I move faster? What are pieces that I can bring with me? And the fact that I am limited to just a month to crank something out is like both a really good thing and a really hard thing. So that's what I'm excited about and been working on.
Very cool. I love that. Well, as I said at the top, or maybe in the middle, the spirit of JS Party will certainly live on, both in the Dysfunctional Pod and also on Changelog and Friends, where we will be pulling lots of different things into, including everyone's favorite front-end feud will become a Changelog and Friends game show. And in fact, your dysfunctional trio here will be on an upcoming episode of that. So definitely subscribe to the Changelog if you want more like this. And of course, to Dysfunctional if you want more like that. Anything else we want to say before we call it a show?
Ahoy, ahoy.
These last 7 years for KBall and I have been amazing. Like it's been so much fun being on the show with you and just like all of the people that we've met and talked to. It's been a ton of fun and I'm really excited for where the Changelog goes in the future. I've been listening to all of the episodes and it's been a lot of fun. Continue doing the great work.
Thank you. And it's been a blast for me as well. I think that of all the shows that we are retiring, this one is the hardest for sure because it's very close to my heart. KBall, anything to say?
I feel like Nick said everything. So I don't know. Yeah, this has been, it's wild. I think I've mentioned this before, but I've been on JS Party longer than I've ever been at a single job. So y'all, and in particular looking at Nick and Jerod, who've been on it the whole time. Love you, Amy, but you're too new. Y'all have been a part of my professional life for more than any single coworker in a job setting. So that's, I don't know.
Crazy.
I mean, like it's wild to think about. And, y'all, the listeners who are listening out there, y'all have gotten to hear me more than any of my coworkers have. So, you know me.
I'm so sorry.
Yes, maybe I should be apologizing. But I guess the thing that I would say there then is out to listeners, whether or not you come along with us on the dysfunctional ride as we do that, like, don't be strangers. We're just people. If you miss hearing from us, reach out to us. You can, I think we're all findable on LinkedIn and socials and various other things. You can send us messages and we will probably reply. So yeah, I mean, don't be strangers.
There you go. Do not be strangers. Definitely reach out. We appreciate you listening to us all these years. 350 episodes. That is an accomplishment. That's quite a few. Most podcasts don't make it to 100 episodes. So that's pretty cool. And we wouldn't have been able to do it, especially in a continued sustained fashion, if it wasn't for you all listening every week. Because as you know, we have bills to pay, and we pay those bills by having advertisers. And those advertisers don't want to advertise unless we have listeners. And so to make the things go around, you are a huge part of that equation. We appreciate each and every one of you for listening all these years. It's been a blast. I've learned a lot about TypeScript. I've learned a lot about podcasting, and have grown a lot as podcasters through this. So definitely stay tuned for more from Dysfunctional, Changelog, and reach out like KBall said. Okay.
And Jerod, we'll have an open invitation for you to join anytime you want to talk about TypeScript.
I'm ready. I'm available. I have more free time now. I don't have a JS Party pod to record, so pick any topic besides that one and send the invite over, and we'll be ready to rock. All right, for Nick, Amy, and KBall, I'm Jerod. This is JS Party, and we'll talk to you on some other show. Okay, so we have more people to thank, and I'm sure I'll forget someone, but I do want to shout out every JS Party panelist who helped make the pod awesome through the years, starting at the start with the original hosting trio. Thank you to Michael Rogers, Alex Sexton, and Rachel White. Then came the episode 20 rebooters, Suze Hinton, Chris Bone Skull Hiller, Faraz Abuka DJ, and Safia Abdallah. We had so many awesome co-hosts along the way. Shout out to Divya, Emma Bostian, Ali Spittle, Amelia Wattenberger, Jessica Sachs, and of course, Amel Hussein. JS Party wouldn't have been the same without y'all. Thanks also to the people behind People on Mic. Adam Stakoviak, Jason Backens, Brian Lozano, Adam Clark, Jake Stutzman, and to all of our guests over the years. Thank you for spending your time with us. And one more thank you to our longtime partners at Fly.io for supporting JS Party all these years. To Breakmaster Cylinder for cranking out the best beats in the biz. You can still get your fix of the JS Party theme song, this outro song, and various remixes, by listening to Changelog Beats on your favorite music streaming platform. So that's cool. All right, that's it. The JS Party is over. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Bye, y'all.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
It must have been cold there in my shadow.
It just really must have been cold there in the shadow.
To never have sunlight on your face.
To never have sunlight on your face.
You were content to let me shine. That's your way.
Content to let me shine. That's your way.
You always walked a step behind.
They're always walking a step behind.
So you're really the one with all the glory.
While you were the one with all the strength.
You're the one with all the strength.
A beautiful face without a name. For so
A beautiful face without a name for so long.
beautiful smile to hide the pain.
A beautiful smile to hide the pain.
Did you ever know that you're my hero?
Did you ever know that you're my hero?
And everything I would like to be.
It's everything I would like it to be.
I can fly higher than an eagle.
I can fly higher than an eagle.
You are the wind beneath my wings.
Thank you for putting the tailwind beneath our wings, Adam.